Hey everybody, welcome to the second lecture in Module 2 over Understanding the Rhetorical Situation, Audience, Purpose, and Context. I just borrowed this PowerPoint from the Purdue University Online Writing Lab website. There's a link to the OWL on a couple different pages on our Blackboard page. They have lots of different materials for students and instructors, so it's worth checking out to help you with your essay writing, especially with regards to grammar or MLA format, but that's neither here nor there. But you should check it out. It's definitely a good website. Anyways, let's start with rhetoric and the rhetorical situation. Rhetoric is just using language effectively in certain situations, right? Or not only in certain situations, but to accomplish certain goals, right? So whether that be to convince someone of something, to help teach someone something, to just tell an entertaining story, right? Anytime you as a person use language for specific purposes, you're sort of using rhetoric. The rhetorical situation is just the circumstances in which you communicate, right? So a job interview is a rhetorical situation, right? In a job interview, you think very carefully about the language you use in order to best or most effectively communicate in that specific situation. Anytime you communicate, more or less, you're in a rhetorical situation. You're using language in a specific way to accomplish certain goals based on the circumstances in which you find yourself communicating. This cute little, I don't know what you would call it, Venn diagram type thing just helps illustrate what goes into the rhetorical situation, right? So the rhetorical situation involves you as the writer, your audience, the purpose for the communication, the topic which you're communicating, the context in which you write or communicate, and the culture in which you write and communicate. And we'll talk a little bit about all these things in this podcast. We'll also talk a little bit about the Bartholomew article, Inventing the University, and the Clark article, A Genre Approach to Writing Assignments, and how those sort of intersect with the assignment you have to do at the end of Module 2. So first of all, there's you, the writer. Anything you write, obviously, is going to be influenced by where you're situated, by your sort of characteristics as a person, which include all these different things. So your age, your experiences, your gender, your location, your political beliefs, your parents and peers, your education, etc., etc. All these different things go into changing the way you write. So from the perspective of the Bartholomew article, one thing he's talking about in that article is, as instructors, we have to realize who our students are as writers, right? So our students aren't experts in the fields that we want them to write in. So if your teacher is a political scientist, right, you're not an expert in political science, but they are. So we as instructors kind of expect certain things out of you, certain things that are commonplace in the field that you may not be familiar with based on, your experiences, your education, which you shouldn't be familiar with, right? Because in a lot of ways you go to college to learn these things. But what ends up happening, Bartholomew says, is you sort of realize that, like, you know who you are as a writer, and you know sort of what's expected to you from your audience. So you write in sort of this way that, while it shows kind of your deficiencies or the things that you can't do, or where you're kind of falling short in meeting the expectations of whatever field you're writing in, but you're still aware of those expectations. You're still aware of what you need to do. You just don't know how to accomplish what you need to accomplish. So you kind of, students do this weird little awkward, what Bartholomew calls inventing the university, where they kind of fill in the gaps of what they don't know with kind of what they think they should be doing. I get the next slide to come up. Whoops. Purpose. So within the context of the classroom, your purpose is very clear, right? You write in order to get a grade. But in other contexts, your purpose could be varied things. And your writing is going to change based on what your purpose is. Also, your genre is going to change based on what your purpose is. So, in a lot of ways, genres are meant to respond to specific purposes or specific situations or specific rhetorical situations, right? So, when a certain situation calls for a certain kind of writing, most people turn to certain kinds of genres, right? So, for example, the greeting card. Like, the greeting card industry is sort of built on responding to, like, having ready-made genres, or it's actually a ready-made genre that's pre-packaged to respond to different purposes. So you go to the aisle in the grocery store, and you have all these greeting cards that are tailor-made to specific purposes, right? Graduation, birthday, Mother's Day, Father's Day, whatever. And all these sort of greeting cards, this genre is pre-packaged to sort of contain language that is responding to a certain situation. More on genre. Again, genre is all about thinking about what's the right genre for the right situation, or what's sort of why am I writing, and based on why I'm writing, what genre should I use. And in the classroom setting, one thing Clark talks about is we should approach writing assignments as if they were genres, because they are. Like, writing assignments have, like, a writing assignment or an essay in a classroom is a, it has a certain purpose. And because of that, we need to think about the writing assignment as a genre that has a certain form, that has certain requirements. And when you're doing this assignment, think about what you're doing when you're analyzing the assignment that you chose to analyze for your genre analysis. Think about, okay, if this assignment were a genre, well, since it is a genre, what are the requirements of this genre as assignment? Like, what was expected of me? Like, what's the form that I was going for? So, for example, if you're doing a lab report is a very specific kind of a genre. And if you approach a lab report assignment as a genre, you look at it as, okay, since it's a lab report, I have to do these certain things. Certain things are expected of me based on who my audience is, right? So who am I writing for? One thing Bartholomew talks about is how in the classroom we sometimes do all these weird things where we tell you to, your pretend audience is this group, right? But as students, you're smart enough to realize that, in a classroom setting, your primary audience is always going to be the teacher because they give you a grade, right? So in some ways, according to Bartholomew, a lot of writing assignments are tailor-made for us as the audience. Even though we may tell you your audience is some hypothetical group, right? First and foremost, the person that you're writing for is going to be me. So we kind of have to take that into account when we look at your writing assignments. So when you're thinking about your genre analysis and you're thinking about the assignment that you're sort of taking apart, think about who your instructor was. Think about what field they were in. Think about what they valued, because when you think about your teachers, you can tell they kind of value certain kinds of knowledge above other kinds of knowledge, right? So think about, okay, based on that, what should I write, or how should I write, or how should I approach this topic? Also, political beliefs, that's a big one, right? So a lot of students, for whatever reason, think that, like, most college professors are liberal. So if they are conservatives, if students are conservatives, they tend to kind of try and mask their political beliefs because they don't want to offend their liberal professors. I'm not really sure why that is, but it seems to be like a prevailing sort of dynamic in college classrooms that, like, students, if they're conservative, tiptoe around sort of their beliefs because they think their professors have different beliefs. But think about that sort of thing. Think about how that affected your writing. Think about, how your knowledge of your audience in the classroom, in this case the teacher, affected the way that you wrote the assignment. But more broadly, when you kind of approach any kind of writing, think about who your audience is and, like, how their standpoint, how their age, social class, etc., affects their expectations or affects what they expect out of your writing, and then write with that in mind. And then, of course, the topic, right? Make sure the topic is appropriate to the rhetorical situation you're in, right? You wouldn't want to send the wrong greeting card for the wrong situation. You wouldn't want to send a Father's Day card to someone on their graduation. That doesn't just make much sense, right? So you want to think about, based on the rhetorical situation I find myself in, what's the best topic for my writing? Context, right? So every writing appears in a certain situation. And context and rhetorical situation are kind of linked, but context is a bit more specific. So based on lots of different things, like the current time period, location, the current events around us, the cultural significance, all of these things should affect your writing. You should think about what's going on today in the world, in your location, in your culture, to think about what's the best way to approach your writing. So all these things kind of go into this larger rhetorical situation umbrella: writer, purpose, audience, topic, context, culture. You probably won't think so much about culture in your assignment, but it's still part of the rhetorical situation. These other things are definitely things you may want to think about when you approach your own genre analysis, when you analyze this assignment that you pick for your genre analysis. You may want to think about, where you were writing from, what the purpose was, who your audience was, what the topic was, the context in which you were writing, etc., etc. The next PowerPoint, or I guess podcast, will be over convention, timeliness, voice, and implied attitudes, which sort of has to do with the rhetorical situation, just kind of grows from that. So I'll see y'all next time.